So where
very
were we?
quickly, I just wanted to throw a couple other things at you or at the writers. I am running into some interesting things these days where for whatever reason with vocals, I'm getting things where there is not an instrumental mix run at the same time as the vocal. And when I reach out to the writer and I go, hey, that's great, I need the corresponding instrumental, there are times, thankfully not all the time, but there are times where the writer doesn't have that corresponding instrumental. They didn't run it off at the same time as the vocal. And then they'll reach out to a producer or their friend or whatever and try and rerun the mix. And it isn't the same. They're using some different plugins. They're using different EQ for whatever reason. They didn't save the session. So I would just encourage everybody to always run an instrumental mix when you're doing songs. And on the same thing, subject of songs, if you're doing hip hop and the lyrics are explicit, be sure you do a clean mix, a radio mix, because there are some networks still running out there, not the HBOs and Showtimes of the world, but NBC, CBS, they won't air it if there's any explicit lyrics. So just a word to the wise.
Absolutely. And going back to the issue of doing your mix minus vocal, keep all your faders at exactly the same level. And even if your two mix out looks low, if your mix bus level looks low because the vocal's no longer in there, leave it where it is, because they'll intercut it. They may want to drop in a voiceover for a commercial or have a scene where they just want some instrumental section of your song playing, and they take the they'll cut to the mix minus vocal part. So don't compensate by bringing up your mix bus level when you take the vocal out. That's a really basic thing, but a lot of people don't know that. So there's the engineer and me spreading the word on that.
Yeah, it's very true. It's very, very true.
So let's move on to a creative kind of question. John Pearson asked the other day, do you see a trend coming as far as what genre is most syncable for the short term?
For the short term?
Yeah, meaning, like in the next few months or over the next year, not like in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, do you...
Which genre?
Yeah, or genres, plural.
The genre thing, which genre? Well, goodness gracious. It almost, I want to say the number one genre out there, which has been the number one genre and continues to be, is hip hop. That being said, hip hop now is so bleeding into pop music that those monikers are getting harder and harder and harder to separate. Is it pop? Is it hip hop? And then when you've got Billie Eilish out on the scene, I mean, where
right.
lines are starting to get blurred. Now, if a show shows up and this has happened, as you know, and everything they want is retro sounding rock, grungy rock, and this show is huge, like when Sons of Anarchy was running. I mean, that they just couldn't get enough of it.
Right.
So when those sorts of things come along, that trend gets in place. And there was when Dexter was happening, anything Miami based, whether it be Latin hip hop, R&B, Cuban music, that was insanely popular for 8 years while that show ran. So it's kind of paying attention to that, but I would also say to the riders out there, and I've said this to quite a few taxi riders, it isn't always what's hot now that I would encourage you to pay attention to. There's a lot of music that has been around for a lot of years. Frank Sinatra music, big band music, jazz, classical music. I've gotten some amazing classical music from taxi riders, and that music does not go away. That music will live. I mean, people will be asking for Chopin and Beethoven piano sonatas until the end of time. And same with anything having to do with Vegas, prime era Sinatra Vegas. I mean, those sensibilities aren't going away. Beatles music from the 60s, 70s, 80s, as we all saw with Stranger Things. I mean, they couldn't get enough 80s music.
Right.
So it kind of ebbs and flows. But I would say, if you want to have music that's going to be around or be in your catalog and be making money forever and ever and ever, I wouldn't ignore those. I mean, I remember when dubstep came along, and that was the rage for maybe 2 years, and now nobody cares.
Yeah, why is that? That is a bit of a mystery to me, because dubstep was just like, we couldn't open up our computer at work without seeing a request for dubstep, and now it's literally once a year that we see that.
Well, exactly. And that's where, it's good to be on the cutting edge. It's good to be, really current and contemporary. And that's fantastic. But, when you're writing, in the style of what was happening in the 90s pop, the Britney Spears, the Smash Mouth, the Sugar Ray, those trends, they go away. And they're not as popular anymore, or Green Day or whatever. They're just not as popular anymore. Not that there's anything wrong with that music at all. In fact, people come to me for 90s stuff when it's a 90s show. Mm-hmm. They want 90s hip hop, or they want 90s pop rock, or 80s has just not gone away. And I don't think it's going to anytime soon.
So if you had, getting back to the original question, so there really isn't a genre that you see on the horizon this is going to be really hot. It's adding some depth to your catalog and kind of having a little bit of everything that you just mentioned, if you're capable of doing those things well?
Well, I think so. As far as the hot genre, again, I think the number one genre is hip hop and pop. But I would say that going across all genres, what I believe is going to be happening, and you and I have talked about this as well, is I think people are going to be looking for uplifting music. I think they're going to be looking for things that are inspirational, things that give a sense of hope, things that give a sense of purpose. And I mean, we've coming through COVID and through some of this other stuff, as I talked to you, I don't know, a week or so ago, not unlike the Depression. After the Depression of the 30s, the music that was on the streets was, on the sunny side of the street, or Pennies from Heaven. They were songs that were uplifting, that made you, in the darkest of times, hopefully feel a little bit better about your life. And I think that's going to be the case for a while here. And that's going to be across all genres. So it's not a genre answer. It's more a sensibility question. And that even goes to solo piano.
Right. I
think inspirational solo piano pieces are going to be very needed.
I actually emailed Tom, who's the head of our A&R department, last night, said we should start running listings for healing. Any form of music that can bring about healing or underscore the emotion of it's a time to heal is going to be big.
I think so. And, again, not unlike the 60s, all you need is love. I mean,
yep. Ooh,
it's still with us, it's still with us. And that I think goes across all genres. You could be a singer-songwriter writing about that. You could be a solo instrumentalist and be creating hopeful pieces of music. I think, it could be trending possibly more towards music in major keys as opposed to minor keys. Then again, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when all these productions open back up.
Yeah. I
And the word
think
on the
that,
street is they're chomping at the bit to open up.
oh, I can't blame them. And here we are, the day that we were supposed to be opening back up, and certainly in the major cities, I think everybody is wise to put plywood on the windows of their store right now.
I've been seeing it all over town.
Yep.
I've been seeing it all over town, and it's a shame. It's just there. It's a dark kind of feeling, and it's ominous and it's scary for some people. And again, I've got the benefit of having a few years on me to know that we'll come out the other side of this. But when you're in it, it's difficult. And if you, as a writer, are feeling that, hey, you know what, write about it.
Yeah. And don't write specifically about it. Don't talk about the fact that, don't mention COVID-19. Don't mention we're going to get through these protests and riots. It's all going to be good. Talk about a brighter day will come, or we need to heal, general statements like that. For those of you, I know you regulars in the chat room know this stuff already, but for new folks, they should know that as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, what was it? Come together or try to love one another right now. I mean, that was a very broad lyric, but it was a huge hit in the 60s. And, we dealt with a lot of pretty ugly stuff in the 60s, and the music reflected that.
Yeah, for those of us who are old enough to remember those days, it kind of makes us a little less scared of what's going on now, because you're absolutely right. We will come out the other end, but it's kind of like going through surgery. It's going to hurt for a while.
Yeah, it's not optimum, that's for sure. I've never seen anything like this as far as the film and television industry. I mean, it's crazy what's going on out there. But again, I know that there's new networks that are being born as we speak, and I am getting approached daily by promo departments. They're gearing up. I mean, they're absolutely gearing up for the other side of this. And so when that happens, the floodgates are going to open, and believe you me, all you taxi riders, there's going to be so much business, it's going to make your head spin.
Let's talk about promos for a minute. Obviously, there are all kinds of different promos. Somebody who's doing a promo for NASCAR would probably want, metal or rock or edgy country rock. Somebody who's doing a promo for a soap opera would want a romantic thing. Somebody who's doing a promo for The Blacklist would want something else. What are some genres or styles or topics that you feel would be useful for promos?
Well, lyrically, again, it's overcoming obstacles. It's we'll survive. There was this last year and a half, anything about, especially with sports shows that were happening, shows that were very pro, just overcoming obstacles. That lyrically, that was a huge piece of the promo department. Superhero type things. I've got the power. I can do. Nothing's going to stop me. And a lot of the popular music that was used lyrically was along those lines. From an instrumental standpoint, what I'm seeing is they're liking things in a big way to almost emulate the trailer MO, where it
really
has, where it has a beginning and it builds and it gets to a big moment, drops off, goes through like a B section, lets it simmer for a bit, and then ends really big. I have stuff where they want, back to the solo piano thing, they want things that are very moving. Generally with promo, they want movement. They don't want things to just sit there. If you get too introspective, might work for the first 10 seconds of a promo, but it won't carry a promo. The promo needs to move.
Are promos almost always 30 seconds?
No.
And so, what are the common time elements people should be concerned with? I mean, are there 60-second, 90-second, 2-minute promos, and what length? Because people are going to ask me this. So, does that mean that I should record stuff that goes with these timings, or should I just do 2 and 3 minute pieces and they'll edit? Give them a little education on that score.
Well, yeah, you never know. Once the music leaves here, you don't know what's in the hands of an editor, what they're going to need or use or want to use. You know, if perfect scenario is you hit a home run and you hand them a minute piece of music for a 60-second spot, and it's the perfect piece, and there's no editing that's needed, and they just drop it in. But I would say, you know, if my clientele in the promo department world, it's pretty extensive. So, you know, HBO promos can go a lot longer than NBC promos or CBS promos. And so, you know, if it's a 2-minute piece of music, I would say, okay, so a 2-minute piece of music, but you might want to think with your BPM that you're paying attention to, that you're making edit points, meaning at 30 seconds, 60 seconds, that those times on the grid are places where you may want to have movement or lack of movement, a break in the piece, where an editor can go, oh my God, that's great. At 30 seconds, he dropped out the horns and the strings, and it went down to just a pulse. You know what I'm saying?
Do they have to be concerned about things like a legato string line hanging over, or a reverb tail, or a piano note ringing through that dead zone that's editable, or is that not an issue?
I would say it would depend on the piece of music. It would depend on what was happening at the moment. I mean, I listen to so much of this stuff. It gets to a point where you just know, and
Right.
there's no rules. It just depends on the piece of music and where it's going. Each piece of music is unique to itself. There's no guarantee that if you don't use a legato string, you're going to have that much more of a chance. They may want that legato string to have a sense of tension holding over where there's no pulse below it, because that one string up high with in a nice reverb could create a sense of tension or pause that keeps you interested in, oh, okay, what's going to happen next?
Right. And what about buttoned endings, or, you know, a stinger ending? I mean, we all know that a stinger ending nobody should ever have fades in anything they do, because they're fairly unusable in our world. So should they try and write stuff in those sections? Let's say it's a 3-act promo piece of music that you've created with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you're going to try and have edit points at 30, 60, and then an end at 90, just hypothetically throwing that out there. Should they
Sure.
try and make those edit points be sort of like sting endings?
No. I mean, you can. I mean, there is, how do I say this? There is no, this is the way to do it. And I wish I could say there was, but there isn't. It really depends on the piece of music. And every time, I mean, I've done this for a while, but every time you think you know, oh, this is absolutely going to work, then next thing you know, somebody comes up and goes, no, actually, I want it to do this thing that you never thought they would have ever asked for.
Oh, that sounds like advertising agencies right there.
Well, this is it, and you know, I do a lot of business with HBO promo, and all those promo producers, they have this sort of thing in mind. There's sort of this. I'm just talking about this one particular network. They have this sort of sensibility, but they're always looking for a twist on it. So if I were to say, oh, do this and you'll get a placement, that may or may not be true, because they're always trying to be creative too. So just when it's, you know, you think you've got the formula, then they switch it up a bit.
Can you give us a range of what promos pay versus? Actually, let's talk about
$6 million.
Wow, that's awesome! I almost just said your name.
I am mystery man.
Yeah, that's right. MML, Mystery Music Library. Oh, MMLC, Mystic, well, whatever.
Although I've been found out, I've already gotten emails from some of the taxi riders.
Oh, I'm sure they're like, I'm so cool, I figured it out. Shame on you guys. Leave them alone. Damn it, I'm trying to keep them engaged. Let's talk about ranges of payments for sync fees on a song with a vocal in episodic television on ABC, NBC, CBS, or Fox, major networks, broadcast networks. What's the range for that?
Oh, God. It could be quite wide. And I would tell you that, I'm a library owner, so I can speak only as a library owner.
Right.
If I was speaking as a record company, the numbers might be different. If I was a major publisher, the numbers may or may not be different.
Let's actually talk about that, because you were the first person to tell me about that. We were getting in some requests where the numbers were really high, and I thought, this has to be BS. This can't be real. And I called this gentleman up, and he said, no, actually, the same briefs will go out to libraries that go out to large indie labels or major publishers, and they know when it goes to a major anything that they're going to pay way more money if they get a piece of music from that entity versus getting it from a library. So something that a library may typically get $2,500 to $5,000 on, if they're getting it from a large indie or a major publisher, it might be something that's $10,000 to $50,000. Is that a true statement?
It is a true statement. That being said, over the last 10, 15 years, all the majors have started internal libraries. And the reason that they did that is because they knew they had to have music that would be, $1,000 to $2,000 to be able to compete with the marketplace. When budgets are getting squeezed by the networks, and they go, oh, well, you've got a $20,000 budget per show, and it's a music-intensive show. Well, how many pieces of music do you think you're going to get for your $20,000 if you're going to major publishers all day long?
Right.
So if you're a show and there's 10 pieces of music or 10 songs, let's say, in that show, it's just math. If it's $20,000 is your budget or $30,000 is your budget, that's your budget, and you got to make it happen. So that could mean, if you do the math, it could be anywhere. If it's 10 pieces of music in a show and you got a $20,000 budget, what's the math? It's $2,000 a drop. And there's other. I've got a multitude of scenarios. I can't give you this is what it is across the board, because I've got pre-negotiated deals with some of the networks, meaning that if you use a song with a vocal, it's X. If you use instrumental, it's a different X. I have some networks that I do a lot of business with, and we don't have a pre-negotiated deal, and it's whatever I trust my music supervisor's idea with. It's like, well, what do you have in the budget? And my job is to monetize the catalog. It's to make me and my writers money. And I try not to say no very often.
Yeah, and am I correct in stating that negotiation doesn't really happen a lot? It may for a piece that's going in a big TV commercial, or maybe even a feature film, but generally speaking, because of the pie being sliced up, as you just described, only so much money in the budget, is it typical that when you get a brief from, let's say, a broadcast network episodic drama, and they say it's $3,000, you don't say, come on, give me $3,700. You just, whatever they say is what it is.
Exactly. Or I just say, no, I don't have anything that works at that budget. I mean, you get a large vendor turning to you and going, I need a song for $500. That's when you start going, well, really? I mean, and then you look at the stars that are in the film and you go, that's a major motion picture, really? $500 all in? I mean, And, I get those emails. And so you have the dialogue. Well, okay, it's not as busy of a day. Let's spend the time and pitch the music. And if we're slammed, that particular request, I hate to say it, just kind of gets prioritized down the list. And the guys that are, offering 10K, 5K, 3K, whatever, that stays further up the list. It's just business.
Ken Bearden asked a question. When looking for a song for a scene where only a piece of the song will be used, what are you looking for? I'm not even sure that scenario. I mean, I know that almost all the time it's a piece of a song that gets used. It's extremely rare. I always give the example that your best shot at getting a whole piece of music used is in a restaurant scene or something like that, where there's a long conversation going on, there's cocktail jazz in the background. That might play for the duration. But is it a true statement to say that probably 95% of the time you're only going to get a piece of a song used?
That's a great question. Well, I've been very, very lucky that I've placed songs in full montages where there's no dialogue over it and it's extremely exposed. And it's another reason that I don't like the term, but I'm so anal about the mixes and everything being spot on with the music I sign, because that does happen with me and with my clients. My clients know that what I represent is some stellar music by some stellar writers, and it will hold a scene with no dialogue. So that does happen. Does it happen where only a piece of the song gets used? Sure. So let's say, strip club scene, and they they want something about, big butts or something, then, it's, or twerking or something along those lines. They may just grab the lyric that fits that particular thing. Then I've got other clients that they want the feeling, the emotion of the song more than they really care about the lyrics. It depends on the particular placement. I reached out to you last year. I had a client that was looking for things that sped up.
I remember that. And I had just finished telling my staff a week before, I can't even imagine a scenario where they would want a piece of music that speeds up. And then you called that in and it was like, really? Well, tell us why they wanted something that sped up and how it was used.
Because the energy picked up. So it's, if you think about a Queen is a great example, where you got, the song is not all in one tempo.
Right.
And the song picks up and I think We Are the Champions is one of them. And the energy picks up and they want that energy. I think it was Leonard Skinner was something I think that they were trying to find something that replaced that sensibility. And I forget what the song was, but it sped up. It
had to be Freebird.
That could have been.
Yeah.
It could have been. And so, it's not something I typically would have reached out for, but, I was starting to see a trend for that. And so my job is to be able to make my clients happy. So I reached out to you, and you actually came back with some results. You were surprised.
Yeah, I was. I was surprised you even asked for it. But hey, I'm sure we've got somebody that can make anything, in our retinue. I think that's the right word, of writers, composers, and artists. There's always somebody that can do something really well.
Well, you have surprised the heck out of me, or your company in general. There's been some pretty wacky things I've asked for, and, I've gotten them. In fact, I've gotten very, very high quality examples of some pretty wacky stuff I've asked for.
We've got a lot of talented people. I know you've said this to me after the Road Rally. Michael Lloyd, Ralph Murphy, many of the Road Rally regulars have said to me, I'm not telling you this just to stroke your ego, but every year at the Road Rally, I just keep hearing better and better music. Well, that's thanks in large part to people like you and Ralph Murphy and Michael Lloyd and all the teachers and mentors at the Road Rally and panelists. we just keep heaping the education on, and people just keep getting better. And the people who stick with us, for year after year after year, it's like they're getting a doctorate in this, music for media. It's not just making music, it's specifically about making music for media. And I'm really, really proud of our members that you guys, I'm pointing to them now in the camera, that you're not asleep at the wheel. You do just keep getting better and better. And that's why it encourages us to keep giving you this education, and why people like this gentleman that's on the show with us right now will give of their time. He could be making money right now. I know how many phone calls and emails he says that he does in a day. So for him to take 90 minutes out of his day to educate you guys, first of all, tells me a lot about his character and his generosity. But it comes back in spades to you, giving you better product to go out there and shop.
Yeah. Well, again, I've been doing this my entire life. I was in the trenches as a player for ever and ever and ever, and I happened upon publishing 30-some years ago, and I'm glad I did. But it's important. If people didn't pass on knowledge to me, I wouldn't be where I am. So, I'm at this point in the game, and I think it's important for all this talent. It's great to have talent, but the business side of things needs to also be clarified. And I think that's the big barrier to get over, to be able to get the income that you're describing, Michael. I mean, the money is out there. The placement potential, I've never seen anything in my 30 years like it. I mean, I'm doing business with companies that didn't exist 5 years ago. And there's new ones, I'm telling you, right now that are being created, and they're going to need music. And it's just growing and growing and growing, and it's not stopping. Productions are on hold for right now, but they'll be back. And again, when the floodgates open, I think people's heads are going to spin.
Let's do one last question. I can hear my fan on my computer running really hot again, and that's exactly what happened before the screen went blue. So if it happens again, you guys, and this is a first in 30-some years of having Macintoshes, if it happens again, we probably won't pick up the end of the show because we're so close to it. Do you ever reach out to people when you hear a piece of music that you think is viable in your catalog, which is important? Because I know you well, and I know that you've actually reached out to me for another library owner's contact information. When you heard a great piece of music that wasn't right for your catalog, you passed on that piece of music, but you wanted to see it land somewhere and in a catalog of somebody else that actually had that kind of clientele and could use it. I was so impressed by that. You were already at A level on my business professional friend list, but that took you forever into the A+ region. So hats off to you.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
That's the sign of a real professional and a really menschy person. So good for you.
Well, thank you.
Do you ever reach out when you hear a piece of music that you think is really good and it's almost usable for you, but if they only did this, if they changed the mix or they changed the ending or they changed even maybe the lyric hook, do you ever reach out to somebody and say, hey, I love it, but could you change this?
Yes. In a word, yes. And I'm going to remain the mystery guy, but in the world of taxi riders, I'm known for that. That is definitely something I do. Again, I'm all about getting things over the finish line. I'm after the same thing that every taxi rider out there is after, which is placements. Right. And, the better things are going to be, at least for my, I've been doing this a while. So do I have all the answers? Heck no. But I've seen quite a bit in my day, and I have a pretty good sense of what's going to work. And yeah, if I think it's, it's really close, I'm going to just say, hey, I can't sign it the way it is, but if you were to, do X, Y, or Z, or gosh, I can hear the microphone. There's the cable wasn't plugged in all the way, and I can hear a hum, or any number of things. Yeah, I'll get on I'll either shoot an email, and if it's a writer I know, I'll get on the phone and I'll make mix suggestions. And it really is coming from a place of getting it over the finish line and getting it to land. And you know who my clients are. They're not small people. These are large companies, and they're used to really high-end music. And so if you're going to play in that, if you're going to swim in that pool, yeah, that's where it's got to be. And I don't mind taking the time.
One last question, and hopefully we won't get a blue screen. Universal lyrics. It feels to me like 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, people were much more hung up on universal lyrics than they are now. And I'm not sure if that's because musicians, songwriters have learned that to add that aspect to their craft and write with universal lyrics, or if people using songs as background source, a bar scene, a jukebox, that it doesn't really matter if it mentions a name or the name of a town if it's being played in the back of a bar scene. How do you feel about that? I would imagine as a library that universal lyrics are still somewhat, if not very important to you, because you never know what the pitch is, and you never know, universal lyrics are easier to deal with than not. Am I right about that?
Well, yes, absolutely. That being said, I won't mention any names, but I have been on a taxi rally once or twice where a supervisor will say, I never pay that close attention to lyrics.
Right.
And then a week or two later, I'll get an email and they're looking for very specific lyric content. And, they can't help it. They're answering to a producer that's asking for X, Y, or Z. But I would say universal lyrics are a good place to be writing from. I would also say branch out and don't just write relationship songs. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I go, I've got the perfect piece of music, and I pull it up and I go, oh, dang, they don't want it to be about love.
Right.
Or they want it to be about familial love, not relationship love, not like, you and me, boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever the relationship being. It could be, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa. I mean,
a friend. Yeah, absolutely. Those are going to be really important in the relatively near future as people start looking for stuff for the post-pandemic productions. There's going to be all kinds of love in those, Well,
absolutely. I mean, and again, going back, we shall overcome. I mean, all that is going to be rearing its head, and you know what? It will be viable for years to come, because if it's a scene, and if it's about football players, or it's about a baseball player, or it's about any sports person, overcoming obstacles is part of sports. It's not just viruses and economic downturns. It's part of the human experience. And, I've been around again for a while, but, the Beatles were a funny group in that they wrote about a lot of different things. It wasn't just, I want to hold your hand. I mean, there was a lot of, I am the walrus. I mean, I don't know if I could get that place these days, but, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think it's good to branch out. I think, but if you can, again, going back to the 60s, all you need is love, or, togetherness, I think those songs were not that specific. There wasn't a girl's name uttered or a guy's name uttered. Occasionally there was, but it's kind of held true.
Absolutely.
Hey, one last thing I wanted to just share, Michael,
Sure.
coming back to writers getting paid and making money.
Yes.
There's one other thing I want to encourage writers to do, and that is when you are signing with a publisher or a multitude of publishers, if you move, be sure to reach out to those publishers and let them know where your new address. I can't tell you how many times over the bunch of years that somebody moves, we send a check, and it comes back to us.
Wow. what percentage of people get checks versus direct deposits? Is it all done by check?
Everything in the U.S. typically for us is done via check. As far as writers that are out of the country, largely it's PayPal.
Oh, that makes sense.
Unless they have some other thing. Otherwise, I don't want to have to keep track, nor should I keep track of writers' account numbers and this and that. That's just, that's wrought for lawsuits and problems, and I just don't want to get into that. But,
right.
We've done, it's pretty much PayPal or check, and largely, in the U.S. it's checks.
I'm a fan of checks. I know I'm old school. I still get paper bank statements, and I hate that the paper, gets wasted, but we do. The first week I lived in Los Angeles, I did a deposit at an ATM. This was 1988, and they really hadn't perfected it yet. And I lost $1,100 in that transaction. And the bank were jerks about it, and I never saw that money. So from that day forward, everything I do at the bank is on paper. And
yeah, I understand. You and I have both experienced that. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Although, I've had some vendors actually go to direct deposit with me, which I find rather interesting. But, the mail can be precarious sometimes, and I do like to have writers let me know that they did receive payment. So, and generally, all it has to be is, thanks, got the check, that way I know it got from point A to point B.
Well, thank you for spending this 90 minutes with us. Your information is always great. I personally love the way you do business, and I wish everybody in the industry, I don't know, none of the companies we work with are scummy, but you are the pinnacle of doing it right, and I'm proud of you for doing it that way. I'm grateful that I've learned so much from you. I'm grateful for your generosity in teaching our members so much, and I'm sure.
Hey, I love these guys.
Well, thank you. They love you back, and I'll give you a call, probably after dinner tonight, just to wrap up with a thank you. Right now, we're going to deal with editing those two pieces together of the show before we put them up. So thank you. I will talk to you this evening, and give my love to your lovely wife, and
you got it. And stay safe out there, everybody.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Talk to you later. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. He's the best. All right, you guys. Thank you. Yes, we will be back tomorrow with a quarantini. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed the show. Sorry for the blue screen thing. I have no idea what caused that, but we'll figure it out. See you next time on another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. Oh, by the way, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber to our channel, and hit the like thing. Tell us that you like this show, will you please? See you soon. Bye-bye.